loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
It's time for another conversation. Welcome to Make It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. We're talking with Dr. Stephen MacGregor, who is based in Barcelona, Spain, and he's the author of The Daily Reset. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Noreen. Lovely to join you today.
So we're going to be talking about how can we foster a supportive work culture. And I think specifically for this topic, a lot of us, even with the fact that for an extended period throughout the pandemic, a lot of us work from home. But the reality is that work takes up a big chunk of our lives, big chunk. So I believe this is a very important topic to be talking about. So how can we foster a supportive work culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely important, as you mentioned, also with the context of the pandemic. Um, there's a couple of elements I think are important. First of all, I think that there has to be a greater empathy that we have with other people, and I think that's understanding what's going on in each of our individual contexts. So I think the pandemic was actually quite good for that in a way because we were working from home, but then we have frequent video calls, and on those video calls you're seeing the background of people. People are being very vulnerable. You're seeing kids screaming in the background. You're seeing animals and pets running around. You're hearing noise from outside. You're maybe just seeing the pressure that people are feeling being in their home trying to do work and dealing with all the pressures that they have in their lives. So I think that was good, and we saw that even with leaders. So we saw the human face of everyone within the organization. So we saw below the surface, I think, behind the curtain, let's say, Noreen, and I
That's
hope
true.
that for most people that allows them to improve their empathy and understanding of others. I think that is absolutely a critical element. And maybe just one other to add, and then we can continue on that, of course,
Mm-hmm.
is the importance of developing friendships and relationships at work. And I think even for my own career over the years, at the beginning I was super focused on my career and just results. And yeah, I would be social, but I didn't maybe value or place enough value as I should have on building these friendships and relationships at work. There's so much in that. And even some of the cases that I'm talking to clients through the pandemic, you could say that the young parents were under the most pressure. But what we found with talking to different organisations was that it was the younger staff, so the kind of early 20s, whose social lives also were very much integrated within the workplace. So when the office closed, their social life closed as well, and they didn't have these friendships. So there was even cases whereby when the office was still quarantined, some of these people would get together and hire and pay with their own money a co-working space to do their job. They didn't want to be at home. They're often
Alone.
flat sharing. They're often on a bed. It's a non-ideal living quarters for some of this generation. And so they
Mm-hmm.
would go and they would be with their friends and colleagues, right? So sometimes it's a double-edged sword, but I think friendships and relationships at work also hugely important with empathy. I think I would highlight those two to start.
Okay. Okay. Let's go back a bit then to the whole idea of empathy and being empathetic. Hmm. This is something that you think can develop over time, or you think this is just something that people are just naturally,
There's a bit of both.
empathetic? A bit of both. Okay. How so?
There's a bit of both. They're like, some of the work that we've done in my background is in design. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as a designer, empathy with the end user is one of the things that you learn. It's a skill.
Okay.
So, you learn to observe, You learn to pay attention to what we call pain points or pressure points in an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to bring that into the workplace also in some of my teaching, with leadership in particular, because leaders absolutely need to show empathy. And so you can develop that as a skill. We have natural inclination,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, individuals. But you also get different instruments, like, for example, the Toronto Empathy Questionnaire, which Google used for self reported empathy. And if you read that questionnaire, it's 16 questions. You answer that, you answer it truthfully, and you get a score. And
Mm-hmm.
the academics behind the instrument say that there may be an assumption, for example, that women are more naturally empathetic than men.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case. But even just being exposed to that language is normalizing the vocabulary of empathy. I think can lead us all to just paying more attention to other people. So, I would like to think that yes, we can train that and we can all become more empathetic.
Okay. Okay. So let's shift a little bit of the whole idea of friendships at work, because there are a lot of persons with the mindset that, work is a professional space. So I must remain professional, and if the whole idea of friendship, it may impact on the level of professionalism or maybe even productivity.
Yep, yep. Look, I think for me the bigger danger is vulnerability. There's a
Mm.
lot of talk in the last few years of the importance of belonging at work,
Yes.
psychological safety. High performance comes from greater psychological safety. So we
Uh,
can't get that productivity, that high performance, unless we feel safe. And safety comes from showing your whole self. It comes from
mm,
vulnerability. It comes from sharing your weaknesses. So there has to be, in some way, a leap of faith to take that chance.
mhm.
And if you take that chance, and if it's repaid, that's the thing that's important. If it's repaid in good faith, then you get to that high performance productivity. The danger, if I go back to the danger, is
Mhm.
that there could be people within the workplace who have an agenda, who
Yes.
will try and exploit any weakness that someone shows. But so it's going to have to be a gradual process if someone is
Mhm.
is up for bringing their whole self to work, right? And you would like to think that if you're in a culture that is supportive, we're talking about supportive workplaces, then people who do exploit that situation are absolutely going to be in the minority, and
Yes.
sooner or later they will be thrown out, right? And little by little, hopefully, we should develop that supportive, caring workplace culture. And if that's the case, absolutely bring your whole self, bring
Mhm.
your emotions to work, and move forward through failure, move forward through learning together, and move forward through those relationships.
Okay. Okay. So we've touched on empathy and the whole idea of friendships at work. What else would you like to share?
What else? Look, I think leadership. If I just go back to that and focus on that,
Mm.
it's about authenticity and leadership. It's about role modeling. I think is hugely important. So many organisations may have policy. They may have leaders who are saying that this is what we want in a culture, and their behaviour doesn't support that in any way. So I think that's hugely important. And sometimes there's no bad intent from a leader. It's just and especially during the pandemic, leaders also people who had teams, they had the same issues as anyone in terms of home environment, working from home, pandemic, workload, overwhelm, stress, all the uncertainty, anything, right? But then they had the additional pressure of leading everyone else through these same
Mhm.
issues. And
Mm.
in many ways, a lot of the leaders, they're not skilled in doing this. They were never prepared for the working context of the pandemic. So in a way, we have to give them a break. But
Mhm.
more now than ever, they have to be very aware of the behaviours that they are showcasing to the rest of the workforce, especially if we still have a degree of working from home. Because when you're working from home, you're the way that you measure your work experience is 100% on your interactions with your boss and with your colleagues. It's not about your commute. It's not about the offices. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
the lunch that you had in the canteen. It's not about any part of the building or the real estate of the company. It's about your interactions with your co-workers, and so there has to be more pressure on that. So I think the role of leadership and behavior and role
Mm-hmm.
modeling behavior is hugely important as well.
We're talking about a space where that is where we spend the bulk of our time. A supportive work culture. Are you helping to foster that in your workplace? We're going to continue the conversation after this short break with a word from our partners.
Are you struggling to become an effective communicator? Let Noreen Daly, the communications specialist, get you there. Services include communications consultancy, one-on-one coaching, public speaking and debate training, leadership and team building sessions, plus much more. Visit noreendaly.com for more info. Noreen Daly, redefining the way you communicate.
So, the whole idea of a branding strategy sounded so exotic and so fancy to me. But after having several conversations with Neon, I now have a clearer understanding. I am sure of what my identity is, what it is that I want people to see Noreen Daly as. Thanks, Neon. Thanks, Splint. Visit them at wearesplint.com.
Are you looking for one-of-a-kind products customized to suit your needs? Then shop at Trending Things, the place where customization is always an option. From personalized gifts to apparel, accessories, drinkware, and home decor, you name it, we make it. Get your favorite designs on any item for party favors, weddings, graduations, or any special occasion, all at affordable prices. What are you waiting for? Visit our website at trendingthings.com to order your trendy item today. Trending Things, bringing creativity to the things you love.
For some, work is a bother. For some, work continues to be a pleasure. Let's continue the conversation. You mentioned the whole idea of being authentic, and I'm noticing that that is something that's popping up in a lot of the literature these days now, dealing with leadership. Now, do you think, to a large degree, expecting that type of leadership can be difficult in certain cultures? And I'll tell you what I mean. I live in Jamaica, and to a large degree, there's several things that we've taken from the British culture. And one of them is this whole idea of being very formal in the workplace and even at school. So because of that, there are a lot of people who think if you're in charge of me, I can't necessarily, unless we probably have a relationship otherwise, but if you're in charge of me, there's a disconnect because you're here and I'm here. So for the person who I see as being up here, it might be a little difficult for them to make that switch to being really vulnerable and authentic. And for me, it might be difficult for me to even see them that way. So how then do we, bridge that gap, so to speak?
Great question. Great question. I don't think it's easy to answer. Absolutely, we have to be respective of the way things were done.
Okay.
Because if there is too much of a disruptive change in behavior, that can be very disorienting for people as well. And there could be that perception that this person isn't being authentic. I don't really trust what's going on here, right? They feel that the rug is being pulled out from underneath them. So it's then just by that logic, it's just taking things a step at a time and not going too hard too fast. I think in general we are always changing the way we do things, right? And the way that we work also is changing. The pandemic accelerated many of those changes.
That's true.
Flatter hierarchy structure, more autonomy, more empowerment for people. And depending on the culture, that goes faster or less fast, but it's still moving. And so depending on the context, it could be, okay, do I take this just a little step at a time, or do I push it a little bit harder, right? And there's nothing wrong with pushing it a little bit harder, as long as you don't keep pushing. You push and then you step back and you see what happens. So, you've got national culture, You've got organizational culture. So it
Mm-hmm.
could be that even a startup in Jamaica maybe has less of this dynamic than maybe a more established company. You have
Mm-hmm. It's
generational
true.
culture. So maybe the younger workforce don't, ascribe to many of these attitudes as some of the senior leaders in the present in the present generation, right? So there's all of these mixes that are going on, but I think we're always moving forward. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with challenging orthodoxy. I've always been about how can we push, how can we challenge orthodoxy, how can we, better to ask for forgiveness and permission. In my view, it's not always the best way forward, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the context. But that's the attitude that I've always taken.
Mm-hmm. I am hoping some of the listening are watching this and saying, he just gave me permission to just go and confront my boss or,
Take it easy,
or
step
deal
by
with
step.
something in the workspace. So as we're wrapping up, you've touched on empathy, you've touched on friendships at work, and the whole idea of being authentic as a leader. And based on what you're saying, even though we said work culture in terms of fostering a supportive work, I believe it can transcend other areas because the reality is that even though we do spend the bulk of our time at work, we also have a life, or we should have a life outside of work. So what are your final thoughts on this as we're wrapping up, Stephen? How can we really look at having a supportive work culture?
I think there's one more concept to add in that you've reminded me of on that in your reflections, Noreen,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the importance of purpose. We spend a lot of time at work, as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, and I think it's better if we can connect that time to some element of meaning or impact or purpose. And there's a lot written on purpose, right? And I don't think it's about, oh my god, I haven't found my purpose. I don't
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. It's about asking the questions. It's about, okay, what am I doing each day? How does that have an impact on other people? How is this bigger than just me as an individual? How does this connect to society? And I think those are valuable questions. Research has been done that also people are more engaged if they can find meaning and purpose in their jobs. And that could be through three ways. It could be the company itself, the
Yes.
mission of the company aligns with the personal mission of the
Mm-hmm.
person who works there. On a second level, it could be that they personally, in their job function, they find purpose and meaning. And the third thing is that the company can also give them flexibility and time outside of their work commitments to pursue their purpose and meaning, for example, in another part of their life. And this could be in the local community, it could be
Mm-hmm.
local church, it could be local volunteering, or whatever it is, right? And so those three areas of meaning allow an individual, someone who works in a company, to look at purpose, but it very much
Mm-hmm.
recognizes that we have a life outside of the company as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you said that because I'm here just nodding and I'm saying for myself, because outside of being a podcaster, I'm an educator. And one of the things why for me going to my job is not a bother is because years ago, while at grad school, I had an assignment and one of the things I had to basically do was to basically, I guess, visualize how I'd see myself. And I always, one of the things that I never forget this, and that a long time ago, I said, I see myself as really being one to help to empower young people. And that is how I continue to see myself. And because of that, what I do as an educator continues to be purposeful for me. So when you're saying that, I'm going, that does make sense because it aligns with what I see as my personal mission. So it's really not and I've said to the young people and to some of my team members, I said, if ever I feel as if I'm not able to perform at my best, I will leave this job because I really don't think it'd be fair for those that I relate to on a daily basis. So that is really important. And I'm hoping that somebody listening, if you're in a space that you think that, and it's probably easy for us to have this conversation and say it, but I believe if you're in a space that you think you really can't give of your best, you're really not helping to foster a supportive work culture because it means that you're miserable and in some way you're impacting on those around you in a negative way. So thanks for sharing that. Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Yes,
Nori.
yes, yes, yes. Thanks so much for sharing, Stephen. I loved this conversation, and definitely will be in touch again.
Me
Yes.
too.
Thanks for
Me too.
yes,
Lovely to
yes,
talk to you. Thank you.
yes. Thanks for sharing. This was Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.